Were Adam and Eve covered in the divine radiance of God within the Garden of Eden? The belief was a widespread theological concept throughout the early church. This concept is known as the doctrine of the garments of light. It was a major interpretive tradition heavily utilized by the early theologians. This teaching stems from an ancient interpretive tradition that relies on Hebrew wordplay in Genesis 3:21. This partistic view was heavily reinforced by ancient Semitic and Jewish traditions of the famous wordplay regarding what happened after the fall. For the early church fathers, this teaching solved a narrative puzzle. It explained why Adam and Eve suddenly felt exposed and ashamed after eating the fruit. In their view, the realization of nakedness was not a sudden awareness of anatomy, but a recognition that their protective shroud of divine light had vanished. This belief profoundly influenced early Christian baptismal practices. When new believers were stripped of their old clothed and robed in white garments after baptism, early church writers interpreted this as a restoration to the pre-transgression state of light and glory. These are 5 of the most influential early church fathers who taught this belief. Saint Ephraim the Syrian, who lived between 306 to 373 AD, is the most famous patristic champion of this view, which he detailed beautifully in his hymns on paradise and commentary on Genesis. He explicitly wrote that Adam and Eve were clothed in a robe of glory or garment of light. He explained that they felt no shame initially, because this divine brightness covered them. The moment they sinned, this radiant garment was stripped away, leaving them physically and spiritually exposed. Saint John Chrysostom, who lived between 347 to 407 AD. In his homilies on Genesis, this highly influential Archbishop of Constantinople argued that before the fall, the first couple was clothed with a glory from above that served as a protective and beautiful covering far superior to any physical clothing. Saint Gregory of Nyssa, who lived between 335 to 395 AD, taught that human beings originally possessed a luminous, immaterial nature resembling the angels. He famously interpreted the garments of skin that God gave them after the fall, not as literal leather, but as the dense, heavy mortality, physical skin, and biological limitations that replaced their pristine body of light. Origen of Alexandria, who lived between 185 to 253 AD, was an early and massively influential Eastern theologian. Origen similarly popularized the allegorical understanding that the garments of skin symbolized physical mortality and corruptibility. This implies that the original human form in paradise was ethereal and infused with divine radiance. Saint Irenaeus of Lyon, who lived between 132–202 AD, taught that Adam and Eve were clothed in a robe of sanctity and glory in the Garden of Eden, which they lost as a result of their disobedience. He elaborated on this concept in his classic text Against Heresies, Book 3. He explains that before the fall, the first humans were innocent and childlike, possessing a divine covering given by the Holy Spirit. After they sinned, their childlike innocence was lost, and they recognized their nakedness and shame. The first and second books of Adam and Eve, or aka the conflict with Satan, are Old Testament Apocrypha books that are widely considered to be works of Christian origin. Composed around the 6th century AD, these books gives us the same exact concepts as these 5 early fathers believed in. Among other concepts that were widely held within the early church and lost to us today. These books may be used as evident proof that the early church widely held these concepts. Many argue that these concepts are found in Jewish and Gnostic mysticism, which is most likely why these concepts were removed and are lost to us today. Except these early fathers didn't believe that humanity could reach divinity through knowledge or their own efforts or works, as the Gnostics did, but rather they believed that divine radiance was the result of the Holy Spirit indwelling within Adam and Eve. These 5 influential early fathers were in fact prominent defenders of Orthodox Christianity, frequently writing to refute Gnostic heresies. Yet, they also held the concept that Adam and Eve were clothed with a divine radiance in the Garden of Eden before the fall. The transfiguration of Jesus in Matthew 17:1–9 deeply compares to the concept of Adam and Eve being covered in a divine radiance. Both events point to the same theological theme, the divine glory, purity, and original state of humanity before the fall. Genesis 1:26 says, "And God said, Let us make man in our own image, after our likeness." This not only symbolizes the attributes of God, but also includes them being created in the likeness of his divine radiance as well. Colossians 1:15 says, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. The transfiguration of Jesus fundamentally symbolizes the true image and likeness of God. He was also seen as the last Adam,